Hey everybody, welcome to episode 18 of LiveCast Conversations with Series, powered by Pealed Back. As always, I'm your host, Gene Bernier, and on the show today, we have Yamilca Rodriguez, who is a creative brand strategist specializing in brand psychology and the co-founder of the Archetype Method. Yamilca is an artist, entrepreneur, activist. She was born in Caracas, Venezuela, and currently resides in Louisville, Kentucky. She has collaborated with the best graphic and advertising agencies in the nation to design comprehensive brand strategies and consumer product innovations. She's facilitated more than 70 design thinking sessions around the world, crafting brand visions and stories that span multiple categories and lead highly influential billion-dollar companies. The Archetype Method, which she's co-founded, has its foundations in psychology and utilizes the four major drivers of human behavior. She states, "My mission is to help entrepreneurs create a blueprint with less burnout so they can magnetically attract their ideal clients and 10x their business." So, Yamilca, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you, Gene. I am so excited.
Oh. Well, I know that your bio says a lot, but I always like to hear about your journey and what kind of got you here, and talk about where you're taking it, especially with the brand archetype stuff.
Yeah, so as you know, I was born in Caracas, and my dad did his PhD in California. So we moved to California. I lived there for 6 years, 6 amazing years. California is like no other. And then we went back to Venezuela, and then I came on my own to figure out my studies at the university. And I decided to come to Cincinnati. So I lived in Cincinnati for 20 years. And that's how I got to Procter & Gamble, where I spent 13 years working on brands, billion-dollar brands. Because as a designer, we weren't allowed to work on, we were, very small function at Procter & Gamble. So we were only allowed to work on the billion-dollar brands, not on the anything less than that.
Oh, wow.
So, and, with Procter being the expert at, branding, it was great stepping stone into brand and what it meant. And that's where I started to dabble my feet into archetypes and personas. And so my expertise at Procter was creating personas to sell products.
Okay.
And that was super fun. Also, I did a lot of design thinking sessions around the world and got to travel and get to meet people and do a lot of research and really connect with people at a deeper level and really understand where they were coming from when it came to Asia versus, Latin America versus the US versus anything else, because everybody has a different train of thought, or what I say, culture, right? Culture.
Right. Yeah. Awesome. So Procter, how did you end up, let's talk about the journey to Procter & Gamble. Did you go to school and then land that and start working on billion-dollar campaigns and with billion-dollar companies, or was that a bit of a journey in itself?
Well, that is really a good question. So what happened was, it was kind of in the middle of a recession. And this was in 2001. I don't know if you remember, but there was a bit of a recession in that.
I remember 2001 in the bubble.
Okay. So I graduated and I wasn't sure where to go to school. At the time, I kind of had to stay in Cincinnati. I went to the University of Cincinnati, studied industrial design. And so what I did was we had to co-op. And I don't know if you use the word co-op, but it's kind of like an internship.
Yep, we had co-ops too.
Yeah. And so so I took the roster. I kind of stole it, per se. Took the roster and sent emails to all the people who were in Cincinnati and all the companies in Cincinnati. One of those companies was Procter. Now, at the time, I didn't know if they hired industrial designers. And I don't know if you know what an industrial designer is. A lot of people sometimes don't really know what that is. So basically, I'll just explain it really quickly. Yeah. So the industrial designer, if you look at a car, right? The industrial designer designs everything. They're product designers. And so they design everything that you see, right? The shape of the car, the ergonomics of the car, what it looks like. That all is the industrial designer or product designer. And then the engineer designs what's inside the car. Okay. Right? The engine. And so this collaboration, the engineer and the industrial designer, because, there might be some tension because, I want it to look pretty. And then they're like, but I can't fit the engine in there if it looks that, and so it's that back and forth around, okay, if the engine is this size, how do we shape this around this, make sure that everything fits together. So my job, which it was a great job at Procter was, so what happened, I wrote the right person and I got in because there was an opening and I was very fortunate. And it was a 4-hour interview with 6 people. And it was intense. I had never gone through anything like that, right out of college. And so, but I had a feeling I got the job, and then they called me and I got the job. It was really exciting. Yeah. But what's interesting about Procter, if you ever talk to any proctoids, is what we call them, is that there's a very specific culture, and it takes a long time to really be able to navigate that culture. People think, you go to a company, it takes about a month or 2 to figure it out. At Procter, it takes about 5 years.
Oh, wow.
To figure out. And everybody, they don't believe it. Like you hire that's why you hire they actually promote you from within. And then they changed the strategy for designers. They started hiring them at different levels, but a lot of them didn't stick around because they didn't believe that they couldn't figure out the culture in a couple of months or even a year. And so a lot of them just, gave up but anyway, so I got in, which was an amazing opportunity because what Procter does is that they let you form what you're best at and let you kind of lead on your strengths. And then you get to travel the world and get to do testing with different people. And the teams are multifunctional. So you're working with marketing and engineering and the research and all that. And you're working as a team, and you get to travel and you get to meet people and you get to connect at a super deep level. So, and then you get to do things like I was like thinking about it. We got to do like visions for 2020. And imagine this was 16, no more than that, like 20 years ago, right? And so 2020 was like so far away, and now we're in 2020. And so we got to really create those visions. What are the products that are going to come out in 2020? And so just a lot of opportunity and work with really incredible agencies and different people. And so anyway, so that's how my journey, kind of how I got there, and then spent all those years really, I say I got a PhD kind of in branding, because that Procter & Gamble, you do learn a lot. It's kind of like an education journey.
So I got to ask, do you remember any of your predictions for 2020? and how close or unclose, minus our pandemic that we had, because nobody predicted that, but how close were you to like envisioning any of what we have now, or was it really far off?
You know, I was specifically doing it for skincare,
Okay.
and we were a little, I think a lot of these technologies aren't even here yet. And so we looked further than actually where we're at. And I think that's the same thing that happened. Do you remember, like, we always talk about that comic strip? I can't remember because I'm not a comic kind of person, but remember that watch that had like, it had like the phone and the face, you could see the face and remember that? I don't know if you remember that. And it was, and so, that was, I don't know, in the 1920s or 30s when that comic strip came out. And how long did it really take for us to do a watch that you could talk to? Right. And so that some of the predictions that we did for skincare are just not here yet.
Right.
And most of them we're not here yet. I just say that.
All right. So, and then before we tangent down that, you talked about getting your PhD like on the ground at Procter. So that comes from a lot of like in the trenches experience, as well as like, I'm assuming there being a lot of like training and stuff that goes along with that. How was that experience for, like, obviously Procter's like a massive company. So, and if it takes 5 years just to figure out its culture code, like that speaks to its size and maybe the complexity of the culture too. But like, what was like, what all went into you getting that PhD in industrial design, like you say?
So a lot of things. First of all, you have to be open to connecting and to make relationships, because like I said, P&G promotes from within. So you had to make those connections. You had to really focus on connecting with people. And that's really easy for me because I love talking to people. It really fascinates me. Plus, as a designer, we get to lead a lot of brainstorm sessions. And so not only in the category I worked on, but we were able to work on a lot of different ones. And it was the time where design was the it, right? And so the CEO at the time, he was trying to get design. We weren't even a function when I started. So first of all, get design as part of a function at Procter, and then have designers have a seat at the table. A lot of designers, we were known as the art directors. And so it was really to have roles as strategists. And that's why I call myself a creative brand strategist, is because really my job at Procter was really in strategy. Everybody's job is really in strategy. And so what is the vision? What is the goal? And then how do we accomplish those goals in the most efficient way? And how do we have a team come together and accomplish those goals together, right? And so, just a lot of the things that you do in a company that size. And so one of the things that it's really important to know is that, like I said, you have to put yourself in certain places. And if somebody asks for you to do something, you just go do it and you make connections, because it's the only way to really have traction. And also it grows you as a person. So when you talk about a PhD, I mean, traveling the world, being able to go to Asia and spend 6 months in Asia and really connect with the culture. So then when you come back to the US, you're able to talk to them and they're like, yes, Yamilca knows what she's talking about because she spent time here with us. And being able to ask those questions that a person from that country can't ask. And I'll give you a little thing that happened to me when I was in Japan. We did some research and I wanted to ask one of the women because their tradition is they shave their face. The women start shaving their face at the age of 16. And the reason they do that is because they want, I don't know if you had been ever seen like a Japanese woman's face. I mean, it's like porcelain.
Yeah.
And they take care of it since they're very young. And at the age of 16, they start shaving their face because it makes it look younger, basically. Okay. And then you can, like, anything you put on, makeup or anything, kind of go smoother because you don't have any of that fuzz hair. And it's a big lie. If you shave your face, you're not going to look like you. I've shaved my face many a times and I don't look like you. So that is a myth that you start getting, facial hair if you shave it. But anyway,
right.
They were like, you can't ask that question. I'm like, why not? Let's try it one time. And if she doesn't want to answer it, then we don't have to ask it. So we asked, and the stories were just fascinating. They were fascinated, because they knew that was the culture, but they didn't. What my whole take was the era, right? Japan was a closed country. And when people were able to come in, they always talked about the era before and after it was closed, right? Like in the 1500s. So to me, that was so fascinating, because that's how they would talk about culture. And so anyway, it was just fascinating to me how each woman had their own story about when they started shaving, and it was taboo. Like, nobody talked about it, but they sold like all these little shavers everywhere. But it was just fascinating to me that, just asking that question and being open and having empathy for the consumer. So that's just a small little story.
So you were, as the outsider, you were able to step in and go, well, here's a question I don't think is uncomfortable at all. And everyone else went, whoa, that's an uncomfortable spot. And then you were able to actually convince them that let's just try it once. Let's see what happens once. And then it sounds like you got a lot of stories out of it, because all of a sudden they're like, the first one went, well, let me tell you. And then the next ones went, let me tell you. And next thing you know, you've got all these things that no one's talked about for centuries potentially, and they're just like doing this. They're selling products to it and not even like having a strong understanding of like the why behind it.
Yeah. And there's so many things like that. P&G's expertise was research. We did research for everything. Nothing was going to launch without research, extensive research. We did qualitative research and we did quantitative research. And so being able to go to those countries and do qualitative research, like talk to people, was just huge. And I think people are doing that now, even with their online businesses. And that's why my expertise is in personas, and I help people find their ideal target or ideal client, avatar, whatever you want to call it, because you have to make a connection with your client customer, right? And a lot of people are like, well, I don't know who my client is. Well, my co-founder and I put together a methodology called the Archetype Method, which is based on psychology. And basically, the archetypes sit on the 4 different drivers of human behavior. And so depending on what their axes, so whatever axis you're in, the opposite of that axis is your opposite. So I already know who your ideal client is. Anyway,
right. You want to talk about those 4 drivers for people who aren't aware of it. And as well, I'm about to drop in the comments and down below, Yamilca has a test around finding out your brand archetype, which we're going to get into a little bit. But let's start with, like, what are the 4 drivers for somebody who's never even thought about that before? And then we're going to get into that comment you left about your opposite is who you're actually attracting.
Yes, exciting. Okay. So we have 1 driver is your belonging. So those are the people who are always about connection, relationship. The opposite of that axis is independence, right? So you have belonging. I want to belong to a community, support group, Like that's my first driver. And then the opposite is independent. I'm going to, travel the world all by myself.
Yeah.
Right. And so we have those two axes. And then the other two axes are stable and dynamic. We have people that like stability, control, rigor. And then we have people that don't like any of that. They're more dynamic and they like to move around. And I know you are on the dynamic axis, actually. So you love having fun and joy and change to you. Okay, let's do it. Right? You're flexible. It doesn't have to be one way or another. It's being open to going with the flow.
That's I think I sum it down wildly great with some friends where I'm just like, I'm pro winging it, right? And there's sometimes that leads to some awesome things, and sometimes it leads to great stories to share about what not to do as well.
Yeah, exactly. And so this is you. You're in your element because you're great on camera. You're okay with like making mistakes. You're okay with going with the flow. And so going live is very scary to people. Like, oh my God, I am alive. Like, what if I say something? And so, but you also bring that calming, sense. Like it's gonna be fine. We're just gonna have a conversation. So yeah.
Yeah. So one of the times in our previous meetings, I was in a hot seat around Mastermind that Yamilca was part of, and she ran her assessments on me on the fly based on how I was responding to questions, right? So my archetype was the jester, and I believe it was Jim Carrey was the character to go behind that. And I started smiling, and go, that's a man I could live up to. But so let's maybe talk about the different the actual archetypes, and then talk a little bit about the actual celebrities that you're tying them to help bridge kind of that understanding of who you embody.
Yeah, that's great, Gene, because this is brand personality, right? We are in an era where we are a brand, right? You're a brand, I'm a brand, and so we have to understand what our personality is so we can be consistent, because we can't be one personality one day and another personality another day. People are going to be like, who is this crazy person, right? But when we know our brand personality, we know how to communicate in a consistent way, right? And that also ties to branding. So, but that's another, we'll go into branding later. Yeah. So what happens here is once you know you're Jim Carrey, right? Once you know you're the gesture, the opposite of the gesture is the sage, okay? And a lot of people would be like, how could the sage be the opposite of it? Oh my God, that's a real big opposite. And actually, I love this because every time, we've done tons of audits. My co-founder has done tons of work with companies all around the world, globally, and it always tests out. So we know it works, right? It's based on psychology. It has the foundation in psychology. So we know we've looked at a lot of Myers-Briggs, behavioral science to really make sure that this is how it works. So what happens is that stable, the sage is attracted to you. They want to be you. They want to be funny and they like you because they want to be that at some point in their lives.
Right.
And the opposite is the same. So the sage, right? If you look at the sage, they're attracted to you and you're attracted to them. Right. And so what happens is as we grow as individuals, we ascend to that opposite, or we at least understand that opposite, right? Have empathy. So for example, you need to understand that they like stability and they like, things, and they like to measure things and understand statistics and analytics. That's kind of where the sage stands. So you have to be empathetic to where they are so you can help them get to gesture.
Right.
Right. So the way to attract is to talk to them. Sorry, go ahead.
Talk to them in the way they want. But, the question that comes up to me is then, does that mean when you say they ascend to that, is it that you're always, well, you're never, ever always in one spot or another, but like, is it more that you're able to embrace the traits of that you look up to, your opposite, but still going, okay, that becomes like an add-on to the superpower versus a detractor from where I'm at. Does that make
Oh
sense?
my God, that is great. Yes, it is an add-on to the superpower. So if you know that your superpower is gesture, right? Gesture is your superpower. Then to attract the sage, you've got to add those characteristics to you, so you're going to attract them anyway. So you attract them whether you want it or not, because that's the way psychology works. But it's also your super fan, your ideal target, your super fan. So they're the ones who are going to, they're the ones they're going to buy your premium products. They're the ones who are going to, because they just love what you do. And so that's something important to understand, is that, yeah, you're going to attract others. I mean, people are always like, what if I don't attract? You're going to attract all kinds of people. You're going to attract likes. I think, if you think about it, you probably have a lot of friends that are similar to you, that are gestures.
I can think of a few right off the top.
Right. And then you have some friends that are more sage-like.
Yeah.
And so you're going to attract different types of people. But the ones that you want to message to, that you want to buy your products, is really, if you focus on that as an ideal target, that's what you're going to get. And what my clients have been getting, which is crazy. So I've been working with a few clients on this, and they are literally getting these clients. They've done a few tests on like Facebook ads, and they've also like, all of a sudden they're like, oh my God, Yamilca, I just got the client, and I was like, exactly. So no, what do you do? What do you do when you do that? Right. You keep testing, you keep finding out what other things, they struggle with, and the pain points and those things. And you keep, getting more information. So that's really what this whole exercise is about.
Right. It's, once you figure that out, then you have the ability to ask them maybe the uncomfortable, the uncommon question, right? The question that within their own world that they wouldn't ever think about asking. So pulling that right back to your other experiences going overseas is as you as the gesture, you get to have that, or I should say me as the gesture, if I'm working with a sage, I'm looking at their life from a totally different perspective, being able to ask them a question. But vice versa, I then become, I'm their super fan potentially. Like, obviously if things fit, right? So they're going to see things and ask me things that are more based on like probably stability and like structure and calmness, where I'm like, let's get crazy. How we get those two worlds to really thrive together.
Right. And the whole point of this is for you to be aware and for you to be able to empathize with that person, right? And the other piece is start messaging to them, right? If you're trying to sell a product or, one of your coaching things, is how do you message to the right person from the get-go versus trying to figure it out?
Right. So this gives you, for everybody who's listened to some of the other episodes talking about, like, we've talked with some entrepreneurs that are earlier, maybe in their second or first attempt at doing stuff. And there's always this conversation that comes up around I'll condense, generalize it, but basically shooting in the dark, right? Or we're going to throw some spaghetti at the wall and see what noodles stick. Pick whatever works best for you. But what you're giving people is the opportunity to have, you may still be like somewhat shooting in the dark, but like it's dusk and you can see where the target is. So you get a lot better opportunity to be like, oh, that's a general hit. Oh, they're interested. Now you get to get closer and closer to it, right?
Yes. And so Facebook ad agencies love me because they try to do this with their clients, and their clients, they don't know how to do it. They'll make it up, but they don't know, if they're in the right space. So when I do the modeling for them and I put together a whole, like I put the person and the hierarchy of needs and I put it all together like a 5-page with visuals and exactly who they are, where they're going, what they're reading, what their struggles are and all this stuff. Then you give it to the Facebook ad agency and they're like, this is amazing. Like, how did you do this?
Yeah.
So.
Well, for them, like if they're going to get ranked on how good, like what's their cost per acquisition, right? You hand them that, and all of a sudden they look like rock stars because as your mission states, you want to 10x people's lives and businesses. Well, now all of a sudden, instead of wasting hundreds, thousands or more, like shooting in the dark, you get a very, very specific slice at a very specific target market who's like very open to your idea. So now all of a sudden, these agencies get to come in and look like just heroes because all of a sudden, not only is the business that they're helping support through their agency is rocketing, they have the very specific target to go after. On top of it, the company that you're working with probably has such better conversations because they understand that, right? Like, I don't know about, I can imagine this probably rings true, is that more often than not, when you're talking with a brand or a company, like they haven't actually maybe gone off and done the research to understand who they're talking to. So they're making up these personas in their head. Like that's like doing randomly I don't believe in making up personas. So I'm putting that out there. Maybe it's full of crap or maybe I'm wrong, but like sitting in your office with your same group of people, making up a persona about some magical person that's going to come buy your stuff, like just is like a waste of time when you could be out asking them, but like you're not actually getting any closer because you still have to go and find out, does this person exist? And
Right.
And is this just powered by like our ego, our corporate ego, and then all the other little egos that are sitting around that table going, we know best?
I know. It's so funny when you say that because actually I lived it. I lived it for many years, and a lot of times, what happens is I love how you described it. I mean, you're right on, but sometimes the companies they actually want like a broad target, like 2-year-olds to 90-year-olds, women and men, all, and it's like, okay, so how do I even work with that, right? And so it's really important to narrow down your audience. And so a lot of things that I do with my clients is, okay, so now we have the type of persona, the qualities, the characteristics, right? So we're building that persona, and then we start asking questions, right? To see it from their perspective, because now we can have empathy for that person. And then we try to figure, okay, give me an age. Like, don't give me, broad. So we go very, very specific and very narrow. So then when they get ready to do their messaging or their ads or everything, they have that person in mind, right? And they're like, oh yeah, remember, this is the person. This is Juliana. This is Jennifer. This is so-and-so, because it's important to have that frame. So then when you're putting information out, you know exactly who you're targeting.
Right. Yeah. That's so awesome. So the question that comes for me is, so you've got this, like, as me as an individual, I'm able to go off and do that and get a very like fairly accurate representation of who I am and who's the opposite, right? How do you craft that around an organization? Because there's so many potential answers. So how does that come out?
So actually, that's where I got started, right? So when you craft that, so you're looking at the product, right? You're looking at the product as the brand.
Okay.
Right? So if you think about an organization like P&G, you would kind of focus on not just like toothpaste. I worked on toothpaste, by the way. Not just on toothpaste, well, which brand? Because we have 3D White, we have Complete, right? And so if you say, okay, 3D White has a specific, I worked on 3D White. So 3D White has specific, the people who buy 3D White are very specific set of people, and they have certain characteristics. So that's how narrow you can get. You have a strategic target, is what they call it, P&G, and that's a little broader. But then we go into persona, so we can design products very specific to that personality. And so that's how you do it with brands, right? You have to really, if the brand has different products, you know, you might be targeting different people. You might be targeting the same person. So actually, we started this methodology with big brands. And what I like, my mission, like I said, I worked on $1 billion brands. I had big budgets. I worked, but my mission is to bring it to the people who are now their own brand, right? Or have a brand that they want to bring to the world, which could never have access to all those resources.
Right. So where you actually are, like, your market is then the people that are like the person who's the brand, right? You're not necessarily going after other bigger companies or anything like that. You're helping people that are like starting out, going, who do I speak to?
Yeah. So there's two people I'm targeting, like the people who are just starting a brand kind of in the beginnings, or the people who have a brand but haven't been able to grow their brand because they're not targeting the right individuals.
Right.
So they've kind of plateaued. They want to rebrand, and they're kind of trying to figure out where to go from there.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense. That's awesome. Can we talk about, so we know that there's two archetypes out there. There's the Jester and the Sage. What are the other ones that are part of this?
Yeah, so there's 12 archetypes, and in the belonging axis we have 3, which is the lover, the lover, the good guy, good girl, or girl next door is what I call it.
Okay.
And then we also have the caregiver, right? So those are the 3 on the belonging, right? You can see that they're about relationships and passion and indulgence.
Yeah.
Okay. So on the opposite axis, we have what we call the independent axis. And there you have the explorer, the hero, and the innocent.
Okay.
And then on the stable side, you have the sage, the creator, and you also have, I have to remember them all, the sage, the creator, and the ruler. Okay, so the king, queen, right. The creator is kind of like an architect who's like has a creative mind, but is very rigorous. So it's very about perfection and stability. And then you have the sage, which is about analytics. And then dynamic, you have the magician, you have the gesture, and you have the outlaw, which is trying to break all the rules. And so if you look at me, so actually I didn't want to get into this depth, but you have a primary and a secondary archetype. So when I go and do the assessment, like a call, I mean, on the quiz, you're just going to get your primary. But when I like to do the assessment myself, because I want to make sure that we assess it correctly, so then we can really work moving forward. So for example, I'm a lover.
That's your primary.
That's my primary. So I am Marilyn Monroe as a celebrity.
Okay.
And then my secondary is the magician, which is Oprah.
Interesting. So
yes.
Tell me a little bit more about the relationship between the primary and secondary. Like I think I kind of get it, but like you obviously primarily show up as the lover, but then you have these underlying traits as the magician. That's like kind of like your first add-on to those sets of skills, or like innate abilities, I'd almost, I guess, say.
Yeah, so it's great question. So let's get into the 2.0, what I call it. So they have to be next to each other, like the wings, right? So if I'm in the belonging axis, it has to be the dynamic or the stability. It can't be the opposite, because remember, the opposite is the ideal client, right? And so I'm lover, and I'm a little bit more dynamic than I am stable, as you can tell. Like I'm a little bit like, I'm okay with like the flow and the dynamic and all that. Yeah. So I am attracted more to the dynamic. But if you think about what's in the dynamic, you have the magician, the outlaw, and the gesture. I'm more of a magician, right? The magicians are kind of that's why I love strategy so much, is like they can see the future. They have a vision for things. And so I think that's where I get all my like head ideas. And, the lover is more indulgent and passionate and compassionate. Right. And so it's more about that connection is what they need. But then the magician is like, what are the ideas and what can we make and what are the possibilities?
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. And just a little, just to go a little deeper than that, then you have that converts into one axis, and the axis makes a quadrant. And so I would be in the play quadrant.
Okay.
So then there's quadrants, and then we start talking about what does it mean to be in the play quadrant. So it can get very strategic and very comprehensive. So, made it super simple for people to understand, because branding is not just a logo. And that's what I always tell people. Your brand is not your logo, people. Your brand is not your colors. It's everything, right? Your personality. Everything that encompasses that. And so people are thinking like, oh, my brand is my logo. And it's not.
It's really not. Like, I'm so happy to hear you say that, because I've said that to clients many, many times. Oh, just like, maybe it's a little bit of me just like wanting to move the show or whatever, but it's just like, it doesn't fucking matter. At the end of the day, like, how are you going to show up? No one's going to remember what color of blue you had in your logo or anything else. They don't give two shit. And so how you show up and how you actually make them feel and how you solve their problems is more important than anything else. Like, seeing people dumping an obscene amount of time and an obscene amount of money into logos is just like, you could have used that to get to know your client.
And for me, I mean, I'm a designer, okay? I like logos. I'm very like protective. The other day, somebody was like, you could teach somebody to do logos. I'm like, you can't teach somebody to do logos. I was like, no. So one of the things that I do in my VIP clients is I actually, based on your brand, based on your personality, we create a logo.
Yeah.
And so now you're not just creating a logo, like out of nowhere, right? Yeah. You actually creating it with a purpose.
Well, you mean you don't just go to Wix and like hit the button a whole bunch of times and do what you like? I don't know anybody that did, but movement over progress over movement sometimes.
Yeah, exactly.
So to get into that deeper set, so the first step is you can find out your primary by going through the brand archetype.co. And then the next step is having a consultation call with you to dive deeper. And that's where you were talking about giving those Facebook agencies like a 5 or 10 page kind of like strategy. That's where all that then comes up.
Yeah. So I have right now, I have three programs, a fourth one kind of, but like the first one is, so you can get free quiz. The quiz is free. The assessment is free too. But if you want like a document to explain all that, that's where the different services go. So I have a really small package that's a $500 package that I go through your primary and secondary and give you all the information about what that means. And then I have another one that's just $2,000 that goes into kind of the quadrant, the primary, secondary, the quadrant. That's a 14-page document. And then we talk about your niche because it has to do with your positioning. right? Where you positioned on your brand. And then I have a third offer, which is creating your ideal target. So you still get like the 14-page, but now you're getting like a 8-page ideal target, very specific. So you could go do Facebook ads. And we talk about the journey map. So the customer journey map, really, where's the customer? How do you start awareness? Where do you go, to purchase, and how do you get them full circle? So we kind of do that whole piece. And then if they want logos and assets, we do that as well. But that's a different, that's a little different program.
Yeah, it's a different engagement, but those are all parts of how you fill up that whole brand promise of like, we can give you the tools to 10x your company.
Yes.
You're giving them the
if
powers.
you know who you're targeting, you are golden, right? Yeah.
I hear you. And, for me, I'm still working on that, but I know some of them are sages now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So you can start figuring out how to message to your sage.
Yeah. Well, like I had said at the top of before we came on, 45 minutes is going to evaporate. And I see we're at 46 minutes already. So this continues to live up to 18 episodes of tradition of going, past our time limit. So I want to be respectful of your time. I know that it's later there for you. And again, thank you so much for being on the show today. Like there's not just one gem. There's a ton of gems that you've just shared with people that is going to, we get to keep this here now for forever, or as long as the internet's around. So thank you so much. I do have one question I ask everybody before we wrap up the show. If you could go back 10 years, what's that one piece of advice you would give yourself?
Oh my God, like so much, Gene. Like I've done so many courses, so many trainings to figure out where I want to take my brand. I kind of feel really good about my message now, and I feel really strong about where I'm going. So I would tell myself, don't take all those courses and just do this, and this. No, I'm just joking. But yeah, I mean, obviously, I didn't even know that I was going to become an entrepreneur 10 years ago. But I would definitely tell myself, quit P&G a little earlier. You can do your own thing. And just focus on taking your brand. And I wouldn't do probably as much stuff as I've been doing. But, sometimes that's part of the process, right?
Yeah, you got to learn that, right? And the adventures and the stories that fill all that up. But so what I'm hearing is trust in yourself a little bit more and dive into it.
Yes. Trust your gut.
Yeah. Well, from the gesture side, I'm pro winging it. So, let's pass that down the pipe, up, down time, and back up in time. So, again,
cool. Thank you so much. It was so fun.
Awesome. This was a great call. So, everybody, we're wrapping up episode 18. Next week, on the Teflon Tales with Ashwin. So, we will be cross promoting that here on this channel, and then we're going to wrap up to 2020. Wow, wrapping up 2020 with Raul James on the 30th of December. That is going to be, I guarantee you, that's going to smash 45 minutes. So prepare for some great conversations and have a great Christmas if I don't hear from you beforehand.
Merry Christmas.
Bye.
Bye.